All right. So once again, a very warm welcome to everyone. I just want to say good morning to everyone. If you're in Singapore, it's still in the morning. Um, I want to introduce you guys to our speaker for today. But before we do that, just a bit of introduction of Safe Space and also myself. So my name is Kai. I'm the therapist community manager for Safe Space. So you must be wondering what Safe Space is all about. So Safe Space is a B2B2C digital mental health care platform. We provide fast and convenient access to counseling where clients can actually book for a session as early as 24 hours in advance. We have over 200 therapists across 16 countries, speaking multiple languages with varied specializations to cater to different needs. CSpace is so passionate about educating the public on mental health topics and sharing tips on how you can actually enhance your lives. So today, our topic is on parenting and how you can develop emotional intelligence. You will also be learning about its importance, how to develop deeper understanding of your own emotions, and to learn practical tools for regulating yourself and your children and even students during high times of high stress. All right. So a bit of introduction. If you can see on the screen, we have our speaker for today, Brianne. So a bit of introduction of Brianne. Brianne is a registered counselor with the Australian Counselling Association. She spent most of her career working with children, youth, and families. She currently works with adults and those that are experiencing symptoms of anxiety and depression. She has a special interest in working with parents and caregivers who want to develop their emotional health and increase the emotional intelligence of their children. So sit back, relax, have your coffee, have your tea, have your breakfast, and don't forget your pen and paper with you so that you can take down notes and useful tips from today. So over to you, Brianne.
Thanks, Kai. Hi, everybody. As Kai mentioned, I'm Brianne. Thanks for taking time out of your morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are, to tune in and listen to me speak for an hour today. So we'll get started. We are going to be looking at parenting and developing emotional intelligence. Before we get into it, I just want everybody to use their phones to scan in, or their devices to scan the code that will allow you to engage in today's discussion. We'll have a few polls so that it can be a little bit more interactive for you. You can also ask questions along the way, and then there'll be some time at the end for you to ask some questions as well. So I'll just leave that up for another second, make sure everybody has an opportunity to scan that in. And then I think there's a link there in the chat box too, if you've missed it here. All right. So just a little bit about me. I'm Brianne. I've got a Master's of Arts in Counseling Psychology. I've been working as a counselor in a range of capacities over the last 12 years. My undergrad's a Bachelor of Child and Youth, so I did a lot of youth counseling as well. So yeah, my experience is 12 years working with children, young people, and families across schools, hospitals, community spaces, crisis lines, and just a variety of places. I'm also a group facilitator, so I've done online groups and in-person groups, facilitating tuning into kids, emotionally intelligent parenting, and then Circle of Security as well, which is an attachment-based program. My therapeutic approach is attachment-based, trauma-informed, and compassion-focused, and I use modalities like acceptance and commitment therapy, known as ACT or CBT, and then emotion coaching as well. And a few fun facts. I've lived and worked in Canada, Australia, South Korea, and Singapore. I'm originally from Canada. I've just moved from Singapore in the last couple of months, and I'm back in Brisbane in Australia with my partner and my children. I'm the oldest of 6 siblings, so I've always kind of had a parenting role or some sort of caretaking role growing up. And I've got 2 girls. So a 17-year-old step teenager and a 2-year-old toddler. So we're managing all sorts of issues across the spectrum, one end to the other. In my spare time, I love karaoke, roller coasters, exploring bookstores, and exploring new places. So lots of traveling when I'm able to. All right, and now I want a chance to get to know you a little bit. So if you can look at your Slido app or the link that you scanned in, and just type what, how old your children are, the children you're caring for, if you're a teacher or working in that sort of profession, just let me know, just so that I can get an idea over the course of the session, how to kind of tailor the information. So we've got a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, 14 and 16, couple teenagers, couple toddlers. They're all coming in now. Ten, 13. Give you a few more minutes to add in. All right, we've got a really nice range here. So far, youngest is 1 and our oldest is 16. $18 months, great. 0. It's good to get started as young as possible. Awesome. A few more young ones and toddlers in there. Great, maybe a couple of more and then we'll move on. The good news is that we can work on building emotional intelligence and work on emotion coaching at any age. So all the way from 0 to 18, it just looks a little bit different based on your child's stage of brain development. And we'll chat about that as we go through. All right, thanks for sharing, everybody who's been able to share. I just want to set a bit of an intention for today, and this is one of my favorite quotes from the research of Danielle Siegel, and it just says, as parents become more aware and emotionally healthy, their children reap the rewards and move towards health as well. So today, I just want to invite you to think, instead of thinking about your child's particular behavior, I invite you to kind of look inwards and reflect on your own emotional health and your own well-being, as that is incredibly important in how we can support our children in developing their emotional intelligence. All right, and then I've just got another little poll here for everyone. Just want to check in and see how we're all doing, how our comfortability is with talking about and expressing our own emotions. So there's 4 options here. I just want to gauge and see how comfortable you are with emotions. I know it can be a really uncomfortable topic. So we've got comfortable, I'm able to share with friends and family when I'm feeling, and I can easily describe my emotions. Kind of comfortable, it takes a lot of effort for me to share, and I don't often have the words. Completely uncomfortable, it takes a lot of effort for me to share, and what are emotions? Whenever I feel uncomfortable, I distract myself. That's a really common one I see a lot. And then we've got very comfortable. I share most of my feelings with others. I feel confident in my ability to name and accept my emotions, and I can describe what's happening in my body. So this is looking like kind of comfortable, kind of in the middle here. All right. I also just want to point out that everything that you put into the poll today is confidential. So feel free to share. Nobody can see what you're sharing and what that looks like. So feel free to be honest, and that gives me an idea of where we're at today. Great. All right. So at the moment, we've got about 50% feeling comfortable, able to share with your friends and family. A few of you completely uncomfortable, which is completely understandable and common. Awesome. Okay, thanks for sharing, everybody. All right. And to just set the stage a little bit more for today, I wanted to share something with you to think about as we go through the information. And I just want to remind everybody that emotions are all part of the human experience. We all experience emotions. We all experience them physiologically in very similar ways across the world. And so everybody has times where they're feeling uncomfortable, times where they're feeling really uncomfortable. And I guess instead of labeling emotions as bad, positive, good, or negative, I'm going to challenge you today as you're thinking about emotions to try and identify them as comfortable or uncomfortable. What this does is take the judgment out of it. So oftentimes there's particular emotions where people feel, if they feel them, they think that that's bad or that's a negative thing. And we assign those labels, which often can end up making us feel even worse. And we convey those messages back down onto our children until they start to learn that some of these emotions that they're experiencing are bad, negative, good, or positive. So we really want to move away today from labeling our emotions as such and try and identify them as comfortable or uncomfortable emotions, because we're all experiencing them as humans, regardless of what they are. This is a bit of an outline for today, so what you can expect. We're going to talk a bit about emotional intelligence and why it's important. We're going to cover a really step-by-step example of what emotion coaching is and what it looks like. We're going to explore a meta-emotional philosophy, which is really interesting, and why that's important when parenting. We're going to cover a bit about co-regulation, and then we'll get into some practical tips and strategies and tools you can use for yourself and for your children. This is a topic that I'm really passionate about, and so I could speak about it for hours and hours, but I've kind of put it down into 1 hour, really bite-sized snapshot information about each of these areas. And so that's what you're going to get today. There's much more to learn if you're interested. I've got lots of book recommendations at the end of the slides. All right. So what is emotional intelligence? It's actually the ability to be able to identify and understand your own emotions. If we think about literacy in terms of language, that's your ability to understand and comprehend, identify words, read, that sort of thing. And it's just the same thing. Emotional literacy is your ability to identify and understand your own emotions. Emotional intelligence is the ability to, you can use your emotions during social interactions. So your emotions play a role in identifying who you interact with, what you interact about, where you interact. They guide you in that sense. You can also use your emotions for problem solving. So people who have a higher level of emotional intelligence are going to be able to solve problems more effectively, more efficiently. They'll be able to use their emotions to guide them when something doesn't feel quite right, when there might be a problem, and how to solve it. Emotional intelligence allows us to wait to get what we want. So allows us to manage delayed gratification. And this is a big one in today's world because instant gratification is easy and quick. So we've got our phones, we've got information, we can access all of the resources that we need at our fingertips much of the time, and we're not waiting a long time to get the things that we need. So that impacts as a whole our emotional intelligence. Keeping distress from overwhelming your ability to think. Emotional intelligence helps us regulate our emotions. If you think about times where you're feeling really stressed or overwhelmed or angry, you might find that it's hard for you to think clearly or speak clearly or engage in a conversation effectively because we're overwhelmed by our emotions. They've actually done a lot of MRI studies that show when we're overwhelmed or when we have big emotions, the thinking part of our brain, the front part of our brain, gets really clouded, and we can't, it makes sense that we can't think clearly when we're overrun by emotions. So when we work to develop our emotional intelligence and increase it, we're actually also increasing our ability to manage those big emotions and regulate our emotions more quickly, which allows us to think clearly in stressful situations. And then emotional intelligence also allows us to be in control of how and when we express our feelings. Okay, so why is it important? Emotional intelligence is really important because there's a link between high level of emotional intelligence and lower levels of stress. So when we're more in touch with our emotions, when we feel more uncomfortable naming our emotions, identifying them, speaking about them, expressing them, that results in lower levels of stress. Oftentimes, stress is a result of us trying to avoid emotions or push emotions away or distract ourselves from emotions or maybe pretend they're not there and disconnect from them. We'll often find that when we do that, we have higher levels of stress generally. Emotional intelligence allows you to have a more satisfying friendships, more satisfying intimate relationships. Emotions, expressing emotions is actually considered a catalyst for intimacy and for connection in relationships. So that the more that we can share how we're feeling with others, the more intimate our relationships are. It enables us to manage change and stress easier. So those of us who can have a higher level of emotional intelligence and we work to develop it, we can manage stress and change a bit easier. It also allows you to have an awareness and more control over what you do. And that goes to show in terms of the research that they've done when we see that our emotions are overclouding or overshadowing our thinking part of our brain, we have less control over what we do because our cognitive function isn't optimal at that point when we're overrun by emotions. It also enables you to soothe yourself, remain calm, and stay focused during challenging times. So lots of really good reasons why emotional intelligence is important, why it's important to think about it, to develop it, and ultimately try to support our children in developing a healthy awareness of emotions. So where does it come from? Do some people have higher emotional intelligence than others? Are we born with it? Is it environmental? The answer to that is that it's a combination, just like many things. So there's a combination of like nature and nurture. People are born with a certain temperament, and so that they may be more, emotional intelligence may come a bit easier to them. Some may have to work a little bit harder for it. And that comes with children and adults alike. There's always room to improve, learn, and grow in this area. So that's really important to understand. If you know somebody, if you feel like you have really low emotional intelligence, it may be more difficult for you to develop it, but it's possible with the right support. Emotional intelligence can be developed, nurtured, and supported. And the level of emotional intelligence in an adult or a parent impacts the development of emotional intelligence in children. So there's a really strong link between the level of emotional intelligence in a caregiver, or a parent, or an adult and their children. So that's why I'm really passionate about supporting adults in developing their own emotional intelligence, because it's kind of like a trickle down scenario where your children will reap the rewards and benefits if you do the work. So different influences are parenting, sibling relationships, grandparent relationships, peer influences, school, culture, social and childhood environments, caregivers, professionals, and family. Anybody who's out in the environment interacting with your children can have an impact on their emotional intelligence. This is nice to know, because it kind of relieves the pressure sometimes on children and on parents. And it's also nice to know that there's a lot of people that can impact the development of the emotional intelligence. So it's not always just the parents. Okay, so that's the why and what of emotional intelligence. We're going to move into a little bit of information around emotion coaching. I'm just looking here. If you've got questions along the way, feel free to pop them in there, and then I'll answer them all at the end. Okay. So emotion coaching. There's a little bit of a formula that goes into emotion coaching. John Gottman is the founder and the developer of the emotion coaching steps. There's 5 steps that we'll get into, but we'll just have a look at some important considerations before we do. So when we're thinking about emotion coaching or interacting with our children about emotions, we want to make sure that we're doing that when the emotions are at a low level. So that the children aren't fully dysregulated in full tantrum mode, whether they're a toddler banging their fists on the floor or a teenager slamming their door. We want to make sure that we've identified the emotion that they're having at a low level before we go in. We also want to check in with ourselves. Emotion coaching doesn't work if the parent is heightened, overwhelmed, or dysregulated themselves. So kind of a prerequisite to any of the 5 steps of emotion coaching is that you're in a calm space yourself. It's not going to work if you're dysregulated. The third thing to consider is that all emotions are okay. When we're talking about emotion coaching as a parenting style, the premise is that all emotions are okay. We're human beings, we all experience them. However, some behaviors are not. And each household has their own rules and regulations about what behaviors aren't okay and what behaviors are okay. And that's important to establish within your family dynamic. For example, at our house, the general rule is if your behavior is hurting someone or yourself, or your behavior is hurting an object or household item or something, then it's not okay. However, if you're feeling angry, sad, scared, all of those things are okay. Of course, we never want to emotion coach when safety is at risk. So, for example, if your child's about to run out onto a busy road or consume something dangerous, we don't want to have a sit down about, oh, you're feeling really curious about the cars on the road right now. We want to obviously let our instincts take over and get them to safety first. The research shows that you only have to emotion coach 30% of the time to have an impact on the development of your child's emotional intelligence. So that's a little bit relieving to hear that it's not something that you have to be on top of 100% of the time. In fact, it's impossible to do that. Sometimes we do need to use some distraction strategies. Sometimes we need some time to ourselves. Sometimes we're dysregulated. It's impossible to emotion coach 100% of the time. So 30% is effective. So keep that in mind. And then also be patient and kind with yourself. Emotion coaching, it's a skill, takes a lot of practice, a lot of trial and error, especially if you haven't had any kind of background in and talking about emotions, teaching emotions, that sort of thing. It takes a lot of practice and some support sometimes. I teach 6-week courses to people about the subject. So just be easy on yourself. It's learned over the course of many sessions, and today's session is just kind of a taste, a little bite-sized snapshot of what emotion coaching is about. Now, I know I'm speaking really fast and getting through this, but I just want to make sure that you've got lots of the information, and then you can review it if you want to look more afterwards. As Kai mentioned, we're recording it. I just want to make sure we get time to have your questions at the end. All right, so the 5 steps to emotion coaching, and these are John Gottman's steps. I've been using these steps in schools that I work with families, and in my own family for probably 6 or 7 years now. And they're really, really effective, and can have some really, really great impacts on the relationship between you and your child, as well as watching your child be able to identify and talk about their own emotions really comfortably. So the first step, even before the first step, the prerequisite is to ensure that you're calm, you're regulated, you're confident in starting this process. And the first step is to tune in. You want to become aware that your child is having an emotion, whatever emotion that is, whether you identify it as being scared, sad, angry, upset. You might have a child who is starting to become afraid of the dark. Maybe there's some shadows or some things that are scary in their bedroom. You may have a teenager who's experiencing a lot of anxiety around test taking or school or social situations. You may have a 2-year-old who's becoming really, really curious about the different things in their space. So you want to tune in, become aware that your child is having an emotion. That's the first step. Behind most behavior, if not all behavior, there's always an emotion there. So you want to then recognize as an opportunity for connection and teaching. We want to shift our thinking from, oh my gosh, they're having a tantrum, or oh my gosh, they're having this big emotion, or I don't know how to handle their anger, or they're upset, or they're just crying all the time. And instead of looking at it that way, we want to recognize that emotion as an opportunity for connection and teaching. We want to be able to share with our children that having an emotion is okay. And I think I mentioned earlier, when we share our emotions and when we connect through emotion, that builds intimacy, it builds a stronger connection between us and our children. It happens in parent-child relationships, it happens in romantic relationships and friendships. Anytime you're sharing something intimate about yourself, you're building a connection. So the third step is then to help your child to verbally label their emotion. So for your toddlers, 1 to 5, 0 to 5, even 6, 7, oftentimes they don't have the vocabulary or the full repertoire of emotions. Even adults have a hard time thinking past kind of sad, mad, angry, scared. So it can be really, really difficult if we try and ask our children who are that young to tell us what they're feeling. They don't have the language yet, or even the ability to understand what that's feeling, or the connection between what they're feeling in their body and the word. So we want to help them verbally label their emotion. So we can ask them if they're feeling sad, or if we know they're feeling sad, if they got tears, or if they are feeling scared about something, we can help them by labeling that, oh, you're feeling scared, or it looks like you're feeling sad. It looks like you're feeling, I see you're stomping your feet. You must be angry. And then as they get older, they'll correct you. So it's okay if you get the emotion wrong. That's not the important bit. It's just they'll correct you as they get older. And when they're younger, they're just being exposed to that vocabulary. They'll be able to use it as they grow. And then the fourth step is to communicate empathy and understanding. So you really want to express to your child, whether they're a toddler or a teenager or somewhere in between, that you really understand where they're coming from. If they're feeling anxious about a test the next morning, or they're feeling nervous about the writing a test that's coming up. You want to be able to express empathy, and so put yourself in their shoes. Think of a time when you felt anxious, or maybe you had a test that you had to write one day, and you can share that with them and express, like I remember when I had to take a test that I'd feel really anxious too, or I've been nervous when I have the test the next day. I understand how you're feeling, or I understand that that's what you're feeling. And then the fifth step is setting limits and problem solving. So that's when we spoke about that all emotions are okay, some behaviors are not. So it's okay that you're angry. I see that you're angry. We can't throw your toys. It's not okay to throw the toys, but we can stomp your feet. So we set the limit, we tell them what's not okay, and then always tell them what is okay to do. Oftentimes, if we're stuck in a pattern of don't do this, don't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that, without telling them what they can do, or forgetting to tell them what they can do, then they kind of have a wishy-washy abstract idea about what's okay and what's not. So we want to really clearly set the limit, let them know what's not okay, what is okay, and then invite them to problem solve. And we'll see an example of this in the next slide. Okay. All right, so here's a bit of an example, and this is about a 6-year-old. So you're dropping off your 6-year-old for school. He runs into the classroom, and then he runs back out, scanning the hallways. As you're chatting with another parent, you notice he's sitting against the wall of the hallway and not wanting to go into his classroom. If you're anything like me, panic starts to set in because I'm going to be late for work. He's not going into class. The other parents are around. I'm feeling a bit embarrassed. Why isn't he going in the classroom? Those are some of the quick things that come to my mind in the beginning. But if we take a moment, take a deep breath, and understand that there's a reason for every single behavior, and there's often an emotion behind it, we can tune in. So let's see how we would emotion coach in this scenario. So our first step is tuning in, becoming aware that your child is experiencing an emotion. So he's sitting in the hallway, his head's hanging down, he's kind of fidgeting. Let's say his name is Jacob. You notice Jacob is really quiet. He's usually quite chatty. He's hanging his head and he's fiddling with his pencil, disengaged from his peers. So you're taking a moment to really observe his body language and notice that he is tuning into him and that he's having an emotion. And then you're recognizing emotion as an opportunity for connection or teaching. So you're thinking, okay, this is an emotion, and I'm going to be able to teach him something, and we're going to be able to connect. So it looks like Jacob might need some support. Hey, Jacob, I noticed that you're quietly sitting alone and hanging your head. Are you okay? We want to really identify what we're noticing. We want to let them know, because that helps them internalize, because oftentimes when they're experiencing emotion, they don't know what their body language is doing. They don't know that their head is hanging or that they're fidgeting. Even as adults, we're not often aware of what our body language, what our messages are sending out to other people. So we want to help Jacob understand that I notice you. You're quietly sitting alone and hanging your head, and then asking, are you okay? And then you want to help your child to verbally label his emotions. And you can say something like, I wonder if you're feeling sad or maybe disappointed about Kyle not being at school today. So in this moment, during tuning in and recognizing emotion, the parent was able to reflect about a conversation they had in the morning about Jacob being really excited about seeing his friend Kyle at school. So by being present in that moment, that memory came back for the parent, and they were able to say, hey, I wonder if you're feeling sad or maybe disappointed about Kyle not being at school today. If you have no idea what's happening for them and you hadn't had a prior conversation, it's okay to just ask, oh, I wonder if you're feeling sad or disappointed. Are you confused about something? Throwing out some feelings there, and hopefully he can identify with one of them. The next bit is about communicating empathy and understanding. So you can empathize with him by saying, yeah, it can be really disappointing when we're looking forward to playing with a friend and then plans change. You can empathize by reflecting on a time where you may have felt disappointed in a similar way, and share that. I get disappointed when plans change too. We want to be really careful at this stage not to over-identify and express our story about being disappointed about a friend who had not shown up, or getting into your story too much, because we don't want to take away from their experience at this moment. We want to really stay with them and their emotions. And the purpose of communicating empathy and understanding, the purpose of sharing our experience is only to help them understand, not to kind of offload our stuff onto the child. And then setting limits and problem solving. So it's time to head into class. Your teachers are about to start the lesson. That's the limit. We can't sit outside of the classroom. You need to get to work. All of the other parents are leaving. School is starting. So reiterating, it's time to head into class. Your teachers are about to start the lesson. And then putting it back onto him. I wonder what will help you feel better about missing Jacob. Do you have any other ideas about who or what you can play with at recess today? So what this does is support Jacob in developing his own agency, or his own sense of control over the situation. We have acknowledged his feelings, we've set the limit, and now we want Jacob to be part of the problem solving. It's so easy for us as parents to say, get into the classroom, I'm late for work, you're just mucking around, nobody has time for this, you need to get into your class. And completely dismissing that whole experience that Jacob has had. It's really easy to do this. We all do it often. So it's this just highlights our that we can support Jacob in developing his own ideas about what he can do. And in this case, he opted to do some coloring at recess or play with another friend. If we allow them to problem solve and think of their own ideas, they're more likely to do it than if we were to offer solutions ourselves. So it's really easy for us to say, oh, just play with somebody else at recess, or Kyle will be there tomorrow or the next day. There's lots of things that you can do instead during your spare time. But when Jacob decides for himself, there's a sense of control, and there's a sense of accomplishment, and a sense of pride that he's been able to be part of that problem solving. That's really important. And then this just highlights again what the 5 steps are, and it's a really nice infographic from the Gottman Institute. You can go check that out online. There's lots of really cool resources there for you, as for parents and for actually couples and relationship support as well. So 5 steps of emotion coaching are being aware of your child's emotions, recognize emotion as an opportunity for connection, helping your child verbally label the emotions, communicate empathy and understanding, set limits, and problem solve. And number 5 is honestly one of my favorite steps, because it's amazing, even at 2-3 years old, what children will come up with when they're given the ability to kind of do their own problem solving. But oftentimes they come up with things that are something we hadn't even considered. But in their world, in their environment, it's something that's really, really small and works for them. So it's really cool to see what they come up with. Okay, so our next slide is around meta-emotional philosophy. We've got about 44 minutes or 15 minutes left, so we're just going to burn through this. I know that there's some questions coming through. So we're just going to touch on meta-emotional philosophy for a second. And so it just highlights the main place we learn about how to be parents is from our own experiences being parented. I just want to make a quick note before we get into this, that diving into this subject can sometimes bring up some really uncomfortable emotions about our own families and our own childhoods. And so just please keep in mind that our parents didn't have access to the research that we have today. And they they often did the best that they could with what they had. That's not to dismiss anybody who's experienced abuse or neglect in their childhoods, because that's of course not okay at any point in time. Before we get into this, I just want to also let you know that if anything comes up for you, or if you want to discuss more or unpack anything further, you can always book a session in with me through Safe Space, and we can talk a little bit more about that. So meta-emotional philosophy is just a really fancy phrase that means how we think and feel about specific feelings. And we learn this through our childhood. So if we have a quick think about anger or happy or fear or sad or nervous, just as some examples, we want to think about what comes up for us when we think about the word anger. How do we feel when we hear it? What do we think when we hear it? For me, the first thing that comes to mind is that experiencing anger or expressing anger in my family meant that you would, it's disrespectful. It's tied to disrespect. So that would be an example of one meta-emotional philosophy. I'm going to switch to a video now, and John Gottman's going to explain it a little bit better than me. So we'll just click here. Just want to make sure that we can hear that. Let me know if you can't hear it.
How do children learn about emotions? They learn from you. Just as parents coach children in sports and in learning their ABCs, parents can coach children through their emotional moments. As you begin to emotion coach, the first question you need to ask is, how do you feel about emotions? For more than 25 years, Dr. John Gottman has studied families and emotions.
I started looking at an idea called meta-emotion, M-E-T-A, emotion. Meta-emotion is how we feel about feelings. And how do we think about feelings? And what are attitudes towards specific emotions? Do we believe that emotions are a good thing? Or do we think they really mess up thinking, they're bad, we should try to minimize emotions? And we started learning that really emotions, the basic emotions, are kind of like the primary colors on a palette. And they're the same across the whole planet for our whole species. And they're experienced the same way. And physiologically, people respond in the same way. But the way people feel about feelings, that's really different. So part of what you really have to think about is, how do you feel about emotions, right? Because children will model your own attitudes and your own behavior. If you ignore emotions and aren't interested, they'll learn to do that too.
The way we handle emotions helps to shape how our children deal with their emotions.
Okay, so that's just a little bit of a snippet of a video here from the John Gottman Institute. It's actually a 20-minute video, and it goes into talking about different parenting styles. So it's called Emotion Coaching DVD. If you just pop that into YouTube later on, if you're interested and you want to learn a little bit more there, I encourage you to do that. All right, so here's a few different meta-emotional philosophies. Some common ones that we see, or that I see in my work as well. So we label crying, sadness, fear as weakness. Sadness is okay, but as long as it's over quickly, don't cry for too long, don't be upset for too long. You should never show that you're angry. Pride shouldn't be shared, otherwise you're being boastful or arrogant, so don't share your accomplishments too much. And don't get too excited, or you could overwhelm others. And crying should only be saved for serious events such as tragedy or death. So those are just some examples, and I'm not sure if any of you can relate to any of those, but we're going to explore in the next couple of slides. We're going to do a bit of a reflection activity where you can just kind of have a think about what meta-emotional philosophies you hold or you carry. So I'm just going to flip through here. Now, this is an optional activity. You don't have to do it if you don't feel comfortable, but I do encourage you to give it a try if you are comfortable, and see how you go. So if it feels right, just take a moment and reflect on your childhood. I want you to choose an emotion from the next page. There'll be a list of them there, and then follow the prompts. Now, if an emotion comes up for you that's not listed here, just keep it in your mind, and you can use that one as well. These are just some prompts to get you thinking. But choose an emotion that comes up for you when you think about your childhood. It can be a comfortable one or an uncomfortable one. Now, once you've got that emotion in mind, I want you to reflect on a couple of questions here. So when you were growing up, what messages did you receive in your house from the people around you about that emotion and its expression? So think about the emotion that you chose, and think back to your childhood, a moment where you experienced that emotion, and what were the messages that you received from the people around you about that emotion and how you express it. So what were your parents saying to you, or your grandparents, or your caregivers when you felt that emotion? And then once you've got a few words in mind, just reflect, and how might these experiences affect how you respond to your child's emotions? I'll give you a few more seconds to really think about that. And then I'm going to invite you, if you feel comfortable, to share in a few words what meta-emotional philosophies came up for you. So I think you've got about a 75 character limit, so you might have to be creative in how you word it, but I just want you to share, if you're comfortable, what came up for you. Good ones. Thanks, guys. I shouldn't be angry. Sadness is okay if you deal with it alone. Anger is dangerous, should be extinguished ASAP. Yeah. When you're angry, it means you're naughty. Yeah, that's a common one I see too. Lots around anger here. Sadness comes first before anger. Anger is disrespectful. I feel that one. As a child, you don't need to feel worry, right? I just want to make a comment here to remind everyone as well that children feel all of the emotions that we feel as adults. They're not, that part of their brain is developed before the cognitive thinking part of their brain. So their emotions are really, really valid. They feel all of them. These are really great, guys. I shouldn't be scared. Shouldn't be angry. A lot of shouldn'ts. Disappointment, you should get over it. Yeah. Sadness, there's nothing for you to be sad about. Yeah. Yeah, you guys you've got the hang of this meta emotional philosophy thing. A lot of really good ones in here, a lot of common ones in here. So essentially, yes, these are the thoughts and feelings that or messages that we receive about different emotions. And we learn these things in childhood, and then we carry them into adulthood. And then, of course, without knowing, we impart them onto our children as well. So the purpose of this activity, thank you for everyone who's shared. It's not easy to reflect and think about these things. So I'm really, I admire those of you who took the opportunity and shared. That's great. So the purpose of this activity was really to just understand a little bit about our own meta emotional philosophy, and then reflect on that and maybe see if those things are working for you still, if they align with your values or if they don't. And if there's things that you need to kind of readjust or rearrange or change when it comes to parenting your children. So it's just really good to have a reflection. And again, if anything's come up for you, or if you want to explore this a little bit further, you can always, there'll be a link at the end of the presentation. You can book in with me. I've actually left my space open all day on Sunday tomorrow. If you want to book in tomorrow, there's some availability there too. I just know that it can be a really uncomfortable topic sometimes, and it's good to have a chat. All right, so we're just going to move through. We only have 3 more minutes, so we actually might skip the co-regulation piece and go right into some tools and strategies, because I know that that's really important. And of course, you can come through the presentation here and have a look after it's recorded. It'll be up on the Safe Space website. So I'll just flip through here so that you can have a look once we get it up on the website there. Just a bit about co-regulation. Another quick quiz, if you just want to type in some true statements about emotion coaching, you can select what the true statements are. When emotion coaching, I should put my child in timeout for yelling at me. When my child's crying for no reason, I should ignore them. I shouldn't pay too much attention to my child's emotions, or else they'll not be able to self-regulate. It's important to help my child name their emotions and validate how they are feeling. My emotions and how I manage them are none of my child's business. And when emotion coaching, it's important to set limits and support my child in coming up with their own solutions. Great, guys. There's 2 correct answers here. It's important to help my child name their emotions, validate how they're feeling. And when emotion coaching, it's important to set limits and support my child in coming up with their own solution. That's great. Just keep in mind this is completely confidential, so no stress if you selected anything different. And this is these are true statements through the lens of emotion coaching. All right, we'll flip through some tools and strategies. But I just want to get to a few of your questions here before we do. So I might just pop this up. These are ways that parents can regulate in the moment. I'll let you have a read of that independently while I answer some questions. So somebody's asking here, how do I emotion coach my kids differently as they have different behaviors? I don't want to be seen inconsistent or unfair. So I guess the rule of thumb here is that all emotions are okay, whether their behaviors are going to be different because they're completely different children. So one child experiencing sadness might behave differently than another child who's experiencing sadness. However, the sadness is the consistency that you want to look at. So We always want to emotion coach the feeling, not the behavior. What we do want to have is really consistent boundaries about what sorts of behaviors are okay and not okay. And so if you kind of even sit down in your house and make a list of the behaviors, the things that the kids do that aren't okay, that can be consistent across the household. But the emotions are going to be the same. The way that you acknowledge and empathize with the emotion will still be the same. I hope that's helpful. The next one says, I grew up not able to express my emotions well. I want to be different as a parent. I can start slow, but I don't want to wait too long till he grows up. Yes, it is important to start slow, and it is a slow process. It took you from childhood to adulthood to develop your ideas and thoughts and ways of expressing emotion. So it's not something that's going to change overnight. So it's really important that you're patient with yourself and you get access to the support that you need to help speed things along. So all of the resources, information that you can access, support with a counselor to help yourself get more comfortable with expressing your emotions is really good. And that will in turn support your child. Any work that you do on yourself in developing your emotional health will, like osmosis, kind of impact your child in a positive way. Another one said, would you also work with your child when they're experiencing strong positive emotions to help them understand those too? Absolutely, that's a perfect place to start. When we're new to this whole emotion thing and acknowledging emotions, it's really, really great to start with the comfortable emotions. So when we see that our child is feeling excited and happy, we want to point that out. Oh, you're happy and excited. You're clapping your hands and you're smiling. I can see that you're excited. We want to be able to help them develop the literacy and the language for all of those emotions. If I go for counseling with my child and they have a behavior problem, do I also have to be vulnerable to explore my emotions? I think that that's really important. I often recommend that whenever a parent brings their child in for therapy, for counseling, that they go see a separate therapist as well, so that you're both working. Because if as a therapist, I can work with your child and I can support your child all that I want, but if they're coming back into an environment where the adults are uncomfortable or they don't quite have the tools or the ability to express their emotions and develop their emotional intelligence, then there's kind of a little bit of a mismatch. So anytime a parent is bringing their child in for some support, I always recommend that the parent gets access to some support as well. All right, those are all of the questions that are in there now. I hope you've all had a chance to kind of have a look at this and get some ideas on how you can regulate yourself in the moment when you're feeling overwhelmed so that you can go into emotion coaching feeling more calm. And then these are some practical ways parents can assist their children in regulating in the moment. So the first three here are around prep. So these are all things that you would do during play, calm moments, before we start emotion coaching, before there's escalation of emotions, before there's anger, fear. We want to be able to develop their emotional intelligence during calm, playful moments. Notice, name, and narrate is a really great thing to remember. Practice throughout the day during comfortable and uncomfortable emotions. I notice you're smiling and jumping up and down. You look excited about going to the playground. Those are some of the sorts of phrases we want to really practice saying to our children. Prep during play, during calm moments, using figurines, Legos, stuffed toys, and practice common scenarios in your household. So maybe food and eating is really difficult for you. There's things that are thrown and there's anger and frustration around the dinner table. Then during a calm, playful moment, you may role play with that and have fun with it, with the stuffed toys, having a tea party and just sharing what each of the stuffed animals may be feeling when somebody throws a bowl off the table, that sort of thing. Reading books, there's lots of books that you can get about emotion coaching or about emotions to get them more familiar. Trace Moroney, Brian Moses, and Mike Gordon, Molly Banks, they all have really great books. And then there's a couple of really cool tools called the Turtle and Spaghetti. The Turtle is about learning how to cross your arms in front of your chest, pretend to crawl into your shell, tell yourself to stop when you're feeling overwhelmed, take a long, deep breath, say the problem and how you feel. I feel angry because my brother took my toy. And say to yourself, okay, be calm. We want to practice doing this during playtime and calm moments, and then we can use it hopefully when there's a really tough emotion happening in the future. Spaghetti is one of my favorite ones, and you can actually use cooked spaghetti and soft spaghetti to really tap into all of their senses. So if you're worried and stressed, the spaghetti, the uncooked noodle is really stiff and it's easily broken. So we're easy to crack when we're stressed. Our fuse is really short. And then a cooked noodle, we're relaxed and we're soft and floppy and warm. So we want to be more like a cooked noodle rather than a stiff noodle. And how do we become a cooked noodle? We can wiggle, shake, and loosen our body parts from our toes to our head. So we can start with our toes and we wiggle our toes, make them like noodles, and then we can say relax toes, and then to our feet and to our legs. It's really important during any of these sorts of activities that you do it along with them, so they can see. It feels really silly at first, especially if you're not comfortable, or it doesn't come easy for you to be playing and on the floor and that sort of thing. But if we can do these things in a really fun, enjoyable moment, they're going to remember it easier when it comes to using it in a tough moment. Guys, I know we're running out of time and I'm speaking really fast, but thanks for hanging in there if you're still there. Blow bubbles, that's a really great way to practice breath work. And then you can also tap into the senses by talking about what you notice, how the bubbles feel, how they look, what they sound like when they pop. Twisting a towel is a really good one for anger and frustration. So giving your child a towel to like twist as hard as they can. You guys can do it together if you have a bath towel and you can both start twisting, and that helps to get out of that anger and frustration energy. Any sort of rhythmic movement, jumping, dancing, running, banging a drum. Oftentimes, if everybody's kind of high stress at the Friday evening, we've had a big long day of work in school, we'll just put the music on really loud and then we'll all just like dance and move our body, and that helps us to feel a little bit calmer moving into the weekend. And then anything to do with the five senses, really helping your child tap into what they can hear, taste, smell, touch, and see in the moment, helps to ground them and get them in the present moment. And then co-regulation is just about being with. So sitting next to your child, validating their emotions, offering cuddles, touch, rubbing their back. As they get older, it's important to ask first if they'd like a hug or if they want to rub pat on their back, and that also simultaneously teaches them about consent. All right, is there any more questions here? I'm just having a look. Okay. I'll just flip here because there's a few resources that are my favorite. The bookstore there in Singapore has these feeling flashcards and the Tracy Moroney book sets. Those are really good. I recommend them. I use them all the time with my toddler, and then in practice as well. And these bear stickers are fantastic as ways to get kids talking and thinking about and practicing expressing their emotions as well. Okay, and then I'll just leave this book recommendation here. You can have a look at all of the books I recommend, and most of these books inform the presentation today, if you'd like to do a bit more reading. I'll get to a couple more questions here. Somebody says, my 3-year-old son always screams whatever he wants to do. How can I handle it? How can I differentiate treatment for boy to calm his emotions? I don't want him to be spoiled. Okay. From an emotion coaching perspective, you can never spoil a toddler. 1 to 5 years old, especially by giving them cuddles and warmth and helping them co-regulate, sitting with them, helping them get through that emotion, acknowledging that it's okay that they're upset, really trying to identify where's that screaming coming from. So putting kind of a scientist hat on and observing and thinking about what's triggering the screaming. There's always something that comes before it. So it sounds like if he wants to do something, he'll scream until he's able to do it. So it might be reevaluating the limits in your household, what they are, writing them out so everybody knows is on the same page. If you've got one person in the household who is allowing one sort of behavior and another person isn't allowing that behavior, that becomes really confusing and inconsistent for the child, especially at 3 years old. So there's lots to unpack here. Every child is a lot different. The emotion coaching is going to remain the same. So if you'd like to chat more, book an appointment with me and we can unpack that a little bit more too. One more, how will you coach one kid who has a condition and another one who is an attention seeker but still continues being an effective teacher? It's difficult when you have two children who have very, very different needs and have very, very different behavior sets. You've got to wear two different hats, it seems. And so it can be incredibly difficult. When it comes to emotion coaching, though, whether your child has a condition or a special need or has a diagnosis of some sort, they still experience emotions, and we can still do emotion coaching with them. We can still teach them emotional literacy. And I just really want to ask you and invite you to get curious about the emotion behind the behavior. Whatever's behavior is happening, there's an emotion driving it, and then there's a reason for that emotion. So really putting your detective hat on, because oftentimes we're using our adult brain to view our child's behavior, and we kind of got to step out of our adult brain and really try and understand from their perspective what's happening. And it's helpful to know what age as well, because when our brain's at different development, depending if you're a toddler, a middle schooler, a teenager, or a baby. All of these things I'm happy to unpack with you and talk further. Like I said, it's a really, really short hour, and we've now gone, I think, 12 minutes over. There's lots more that we can chat about, but thanks for listening this far, and really thank you for taking some time out of your Sunday or Saturday or Friday evening to stop by. I'll just flip through here. These were some of the questions. I just read them off of my phone. Just a few little quick questions if you could all answer. Was this webinar helpful? Be really honest about your experience. It helps Safe Space and other developers understand what sort of topics are helpful or unhelpful. So we've got 7 people who have answered. Anybody else? 11, great. And then we'll switch it over to the next one. Do you feel more empowered to overcome your concerns after today's webinar? Your answers are confidential. We can't see these ones publicly here. So give you a few minutes. All right, and so here's a code you can scan, and I think Kai's just put the link in the chat box as well. If you scan this and give us a little bit more feedback about the webinar, about Safe Space, and I think there's an opportunity for you to share what other topics you'd be interested in. Once you finish the feedback, they'll actually give you a code where you can get a 10% discount for therapy sessions with me, and that'll be available up until September. So my availability right now is Sundays and some Thursdays. So if you want to book online, there's another link here, and I'm happy to meet with you there and chat a little bit more about this stuff. All right. Thanks everybody for coming. And I wish you a very good weekend. Oh, I can't hear you, Kai, you're muted.
Sorry, Brianne. Thank you so much, everyone. So actually, before we leave the session, I've left a link in the chat box for everyone to share with us what kind of topics you want to see next, and also your experience during today's webinar. I know we've taken a bit of time, but we have a lot to unpack today. While you guys scan the QR code, or you guys click on the link in the chat box. Brianne, there's actually one question that we received. That is, do you have recommendations for a child that is quick to anger?
Yeah, so the biggest recommendation is really just to sit with them at the anger. Okay, the anger is okay. It's okay that you're angry. And you want to teach them some healthy ways to express that anger. So whether that's stomping their feet or punching a pillow, screaming into a pillow, they want to jump up and down, run around. They want to get that anger energy out, but we want to do it in a safe way that's going to allow them to express themselves in a healthy way.
Right. I think there's also another question, somewhat similar. So my 4-year-old throws her tantrums when she doesn't get her way. When we practice discipline with her, it gets worse. How to best to deal with it without spoiling her? I think you kind of mentioned about spoiling a child a little bit earlier on.
Yeah, there is a really big myth that, and that comes from, I think there was a book and some really significant research that came out in the 80s, and it's trickled through up until generations and generations, where we can spoil our children if we coddle them too much, if we cuddle them, if we address their emotions, we can spoil them. That's not true. In the latest research, you can't spoil a toddler. What we can do is teach them how to manage their emotions and express themselves in a healthy way. It's completely normal for toddlers to express themselves through tantrums. Tantrums are a normal part of development. They're not something that need to be extinguished. They're not something that need to be completely taken off the table. Their brain is based on their brain capacity. They have these emotions and feelings that they don't have the words or the tools to express properly. So it comes out in a tantrum, and that's normal. So once we understand that, then we can go into what's triggering the tantrum. So really putting your investigation hat on and trying to understand what the emotion is behind that tantrum, what's triggering that emotion. And once we can get that, and once we can understand that a little bit deeper, then we can go in and try and target that emotion at the low level before it gets to tantrum stage. So really, our children need to be validated and they need to be empathized with just like adults do. So that would be the first place to start. I hope that helps. Amazing.
So I think that's all for the questions that we have today. I really want to thank and applaud everyone for joining us in our webinar. And we really hope to see you guys soon. We may have another one, another session next month, but we'll share with you guys our details through our Instagram and Facebook, and as well as our website. So thank you once again. Have a good lunch. Have a good weekend and stay safe. Thank you so much, Brianne.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.